an individual and met him or her at her particular or his need in only the way that he could. And being practical in nature, well, they weren't the flashiest of miracles, but God's providential hand, that is his providing for these people, was very evident. Let's see if you can remember some of these stories that Pastor Jeff introduced to us. One of them was we met a widow who was facing a crisis. Now, this widow, she was formerly married to one of Elisha's disciples, and this man died, and she was left with a very considerable debt, to the point where this debtor came and wanted to sell her children into slavery to meet that debt. Now she went to Elisha, and he asked, how can we help you? What do you have in your house that is of value? And she came to him with this jar of oil. Now, if any of you shop for olive oil lately, extra virgin olive oil, you get a jar-like size like this, and it can cost you anywhere like $20 or more. So clearly, oil in that time was valuable as well. So he said, get as many vessels and containers as you can and start pouring that out into them. Don't just get a few, get every vessel you can from all of your friends in the surrounding area. And that's what he did, or she did. And they poured and poured and poured until all of those vessels were completely full. And she had enough to pay back that debt and also have some extra to live on. Very practical, a miracle that met her need at the time. We also met another one of Elisha's disciples who said that, Elisha, our ministry is getting too big and we're running out of space here in our living quarters. Let's go down by the river and start building a new area for us to live. And they did. And one of them got an axe, which was a very valuable tool at the time. Not everybody had them. And as he was chopping down the trees for the lumber, in one swing, the axe head flies off into a body of water probably behind him, and he didn't know where to begin to retrieve that axe. So he's freaking out because this thing probably cost in their time thousands and thousands of dollars, I don't know. But Elisha comes alongside of him, and through God's power, throws a branch into that water, and the axe head floats up. No harm, no foul. Another practical miracle to meet his need. Later, we saw one miracle that was a little bit more flashy. We met that Shunammite woman who, as Elisha was doing his ministry coming to and fro, she saw that he was a man of God and wanted to be hospitable to him, so provided him a meal and drink occasionally. And then, eventually, they built him a room in their house as a place to stay. Pretty hospitable. And Elisha wanted to repay her kindness. And he found out that she wasn't able to have a son of her own. So he said, this time next year you will have one. And that's what happened. But unfortunately, as this lad grew up, he passed away unexpectedly. And Elisha subsequently raises him from the dead pillar. A little bit more flashy, a little bit more awesome. And this morning, we will witness yet another miracle at the hands of this prophet, the healing of a man named Naaman. And at the surface, it might appear to be another straightforward healing miracle where a person with an ailment is presented and then subsequently is healed. As you read through the Bible, you might be familiar with other stories like that, and you'd be tempted to gloss over it and fail to see the relevance in it for you today. But today, I am sure, as we go through the passage, you will get to see just how much like Naaman we really are. And with that said, I'm going to read from 2 Kings chapter 5, the first 14 verses. So it's a little bit of a long read, but bear with me. You can follow on the screens if you'd like. Now Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master and highly respected, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man was also a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out in bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel. And she waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria. Then he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who is from the land of Israel. Then the king of Aram said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." He departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, "And now as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man is sending word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? But consider now and see how he is seeking to make a quarrel against me." It happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent word to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean." But Naaman was furious and went away and said, "Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, not better than the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in rage. Then his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, had the prophet told you to do some great thing, you would not have done it. How much more then, when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored, like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. The word of the Lord. So who was this man, Naaman? We read that he was the captain of the army. He worked directly for the king of Aram himself. Now that word Aram might sound a little familiar if you know the languages that Jesus spoke, Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. Aram is the region where that language is spoken, and it's located just north of Israel, in a place that we call today Syria. We read that Naaman was in good standing with the king. He was highly respected amongst the king and all of his people. But Scripture tells us he was a leper. That's how they cap it off. All of the talent and respect that he commanded was minimized due to those last few words spoken. But he was a leper. Those words might not affect us quite like they did to someone living in Naaman's time. But why is that? You see, for us, curing a skin ailment is as easy as going to a local pharmacy, getting an over-the-counter medication, rubbing it on, and going about our lives. Yes, on occasion we might have to go to a doctor if things get a little bit more aggressive, and they prescribe something for us. But in most cases, the issue won't affect our daily lives very much. Also, for those living us in the modern world, we haven't had to worry about contracting leprosy for some time. As a parent of 4 children, I've seen my fair share of rashes. Some that I didn't know were possible, and some that occurred in places I didn't know were possible. But never in the experience of my family or families that I know did anyone ever contract leprosy. So what is leprosy? Leprosy is a skin disease that's caused by a bacterium. It's infectious, which means it's contagious. So if someone's coughing or sneezing, they have leprosy, those little droplets that go in the air, they make contact with you, you can get leprosy. It affects the skin, the mucous membranes, and our eyes, our nose, our mouth, and it can affect our peripheral nervous system, which means all the nerves in our body outside of our brain. Symptoms include discoloration of the skin. You get some lumps, bumps, and sores on the skin. Because it attacks nerves, you can get some numbness and loss of feeling. And if left untreated, you could even become paralyzed in some of your limbs. Interesting, as I was doing some research on what leprosy really is, and I had my own thoughts about what it was, but I learned something new, that it can take anywhere from 3 to 20 years for those symptoms to present themselves. So you can be carrying it for that long. Today, lucky for us, it's mostly confined to tropical African regions and Asia. Lucky for you guys, not Costa Rica. But why was it such a big deal in Naaman's time? You see, in his time, the Israelites, they were living under the Levitical law, which deemed people with leprosy unclean. Lepers were avoided, and they had to live isolated with people like themselves. If lepers came too close to clean people, they would have to yell, "Unclean, unclean," to warn them not to come too close. Otherwise, they would be considered unclean under the law. And if that were the case, they would have to do all this ceremonial cleansing in order to come back into the presence of their friends, their family, and even go into the temple. You'll see in the picture there that one of Jesus' miracles was healing the lepers, and they were all clustered together, kind of bandaged up, looking like zombies, unfortunately. And, well, we know how that story ends, and they are clean. So we heard Naaman was a highly respected man with a high-profile job, and he probably had all the money and things that he could ever have wanted. Scripture doesn't tell us exactly how long he had the leprosy, but if we had to guess, it probably wasn't too long, because being the valiant warrior, if he lost the use of his limbs or lost fingers and toes and things like that, he wouldn't have been very effective. But what Scripture does tell us is that he knew he had it, and that others were starting to be able to identify him. Can you imagine the complex that this man must have had? He was talented, powerful, likely rich, yet he was being defined by the way he looked. For us living in this crazy culture of ours, we can understand a little bit about what it's like to be judged by such things as our appearance, our beliefs, gender, and you guys can keep that list going on and on and on. Because if we don't fit in the current social framework that our society says we must, then sometimes we are considered nobodies. When faced with this type of situation, you really are kind of at a crossroads. You can either buck up and start taking things into your own hands and start leaning on your own strength to go through life, or you can realize where your true identity can and should lie. But where did this lead Naaman? At this point in the game, Naaman isn't quite there at the crossroads, but he's getting very close. In fact, Naaman is about to get a couple referrals to help him along the way. We see that he's met by this Israeli girl, which was taken captive by one of the Arameans during the constant battling that they had going on between Aramea and Israel. And she winds up providentially in the care of his wife as a servant. And she knew, being from Israel, that in order to be truly clean, it had to come from God. So that's why she made a recommendation for him to go see the prophet that is in Israel. And Naaman's boss, the king, he certainly was on board. He said, "Yeah, buddy, you should probably get that thing checked out. Here's a letter of recommendation. By all means, go on your way and see the prophet." So Naaman the valiant, he travels in style. He presents this letter of recommendation to the king. He brings all of his money and his entourage as if this was a monetary transaction. Even the king of Israel was appalled when greeted by Naaman. He said, "I'm not God. I don't have the right to kill and to make alive." He goes, "As a matter of fact, it's probably just the Arameans trying to start a war with me again." So, the king tears his robe. He's upset with everything. But Elisha says, "Let him come to me so that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." And that's what happens. But Naaman is not received in the manner in which he had hoped. Has anyone here ever gone to the doctor for one thing and later come to find out that there's something entirely different wrong with you? Perhaps, for example, you went to bed looking like this, nice and peaceful. You're hopeful that you're going to have a real great 8 hours of sleep. But alas, you wake up and you look and feel like this. Yeah, rough night. When this goes on for days, maybe weeks, and you start getting that constant fatigue and irritability, your spouse might be saying, yeah, I'm kind of getting sick of all this irritability, you should probably go to the doctor. And you come to find out you've got something like sleep apnea. You're not just going to get a supplement to take and boom, you're good. You got to lose like 30 to 50 pounds or something like that. Not what you were hoping for. This is a bit like the shock that Naaman was experiencing. He goes to God on his own terms, brings the money, the letter, the whole entourage. But Elisha himself doesn't even come out of the house to greet him. He sends his servant. Now, why did he do that? Well, for one, Elisha, being under the Levitical law we talked about, did not want to get too close as to become unclean. So he sends a servant to do it. Second reason is Elisha probably knows this guy's got a bit of a big head already and doesn't want to further inflate it by making a big spectacle. Naaman was also disappointed when he was asked to perform a humble task, to go dip yourself 7 times in the waters of the Jordan River. Why was he upset? Well, he wanted God to do what he had in mind, to do that big spectacle healing for everyone to be in awe and thankful for Naaman's recent healing. So Naaman storms off. He's like, could I have just stayed home and dipped myself in my own land's rivers? They're nicer anyway. Lord, I could have stayed in the comfort of my own town with my own people. Why couldn't you just have Elisha do a fancy healing ceremony like I wanted? Has anyone here ever had a similar conversation with God? Trying to come to him on your own terms? Saying things like, Lord, if you'll just get rid of the issue in my life, whatever that issue might be, if you're having issues with your in-laws. Luckily, mine's not in here. I'm just kidding, by the way. Whatever the issue might be in your life, Lord, if you'll just get rid of that for me, I will be so much more prepared to serve you. Lord, look at all the stuff I've done for you. I just went on a mission trip. I just tithed. I'm here at Sunday services every week. Won't you go ahead and just bless me now? Or how about the people that might not have that relationship with Christ yet, and like, Lord, I got to go fix up these areas of my life first before I say yes to you. I got to stop drinking so much. I've got to pay off some debt, and then I'll have the time and the resources to come say yes to you. Through all of this, God was making it clear to Naaman that his skin wasn't the primary problem here. He wasn't interested in Naaman's riches or his fancy job title. He was in need, Naaman was in need of a checkup from his omnipresent cardiologist, the great physician, God himself, who's present